Hi there, welcome back. Well, the rather daunting task of restoring the cabinet has been completed. So the last task that I need to perform on this radio is the FM alignment. And to do that, we have the instructions, which are actually quite complete. There's the drawing that shows us the coils we need to adjust, and there are the instructions that tell us exactly what we need to do. Now, what I've done in preparation for this, I've actually removed the wax from the cores that we need to adjust, and according to that drawing we know that the cores for the FM are this one, that one, and the ones on the other side. Now I've actually got in here with a very small screwdriver and very carefully removed some of the wax that's in there. It was pretty dry, which is quite normal, but I think I've got it all. Hopefully I have not adjusted this at all in trying to remove the wax, although there is a possibility that I did do that. Now, other than these two IF transformers, that one there and the underside, that one there and the underside, there is actually one more which is on the FM front end, and it's actually on the underside of the radio. Let me show you. It's actually these two guys over here, that one there and that one there. Now, that is really the first IF transformer we find in the signal chain for FM, and then we have the next one and the next one before the end, and the last one has got the discriminator. But I'm going to actually just focus a bit on the instructions, because there is something here that is a little bit different to the usual way of doing things. What they tell you to do here, it's we're looking at this section over here. So FM IF alignment at 10.7 megahertz, that's the IF frequency, that's nothing unusual there. They say that you set up the modulated signal. In other words, you set up the signal generator with a frequency modulated signal with a deviation of 15 kilohertz. So what you do is you inject a 10.7 megahertz carrier, frequency modulated with an audio tone with a 15 kilohertz deviation. That's as much as I can understand from the German there, which makes sense so far. Then what they tell you to do is they tell you to connect it to the grid of the EF89. So that's the last tube before, or the tube before the last IF transformer, and you adjust L25 and L26 for a maximum output. Now, maximum output is actually usually what you measure across the discriminator capacitor, that electrolytic capacitor. You measure that and you get a negative voltage and you do the maximum output. However, what I understand it tells us to do here is actually to measure the audio output. In other words, because you're modulating it, usually you just send a carrier, but because you're modulating it, they want you to measure the output of that modulated signal. In other words, a 600 Hertz or 1000 Hertz audio signal. That still makes sense, fine. So what you're doing is sending in a modulated signal as if it was an FM reception. The only difference is you're sending it in at the IF frequency, and you're seeing what the output's going to be, and you align those two, that output transformer, for maximum. The next thing you do is you set it to the connect it to the grid of the ECH81, which for FM just really acts as an amplifier, and you adjust L22 and L21 for maximum. Then you create an isolation over here, and you put it, basically you lightly couple it to the ECC85, which is what I normally do anyway, and you adjust L9 and L8 for a maximum output. Now that something is wrong here. Normally what I do is I adjust for the maximum AGC output. In other words, the maximum discriminator cap voltage. In this case, I'm actually adjusting for the maximum audio output. I'm not sure that I'm getting the instructions right. This is the first time I've actually done one of these alignments where I'm actually looking at the audio output, the same as what you'd normally do with the AM alignment. Now that makes sense. This one I'm not so sure. But what does it say here? Ausgangsspannungsmeter. So output voltage meter. I think you set it to a 2-volt range with the voltmeter on the loudspeaker output. And you're supposed to dampen the unused coil. In other words, if you're doing L25, you're supposed to dampen L23 with a 5K and 500 picofarad in series so that you don't critically couple it. I'm going to try this and see what the result is, because I can always just check the normal method, make sure that it's aligned once I've done it this way. I can then go and just check that I've got it perfectly aligned by measuring the DC voltage across that electrolytic capacitor that's on the 2 diodes of the detector. So I'm going to do it like this, but I'm also going to do slightly different. I'm going to put the alignment, or rather the injection of the signal, straight to the ECC85. I know that this is more or less well aligned because I'm receiving radio, so I don't have to search for it. I know it's there. I'm going to hear the tone, maybe not as clearly as I should do and will do once I've aligned it, but I can hear it if I put it right at the input, and it goes through every stage, and I just tweak each stage to try and get a better result. So let me set that up and we'll see if this thing works. So here we go. We've got 10.7 megahertz. This signal is 50 millivolts amplitude. We'll adjust that according to the needs. We've got modulation on. Deviation is, well, the type first of all is FM. We've got a 600 hertz modulated signal, and the deviation is 15 kilohertz. So let's send it. What I've actually got here is it's a tube cover, aluminium tube cover. It's insulated. It's got the signal connected to the tube cover, so it's lightly coupling to the tube itself. The ground of the signal generator is connected to the chassis. Now, if I put the volume up, there's my 600 hertz signal, and it actually goes pretty loud. That probably means I can drop the amplitude from 50 millivolts to 20 millivolts and still get an audible signal. A little bit of hiss, but this should do. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to replace this with the dummy load, and we'll look at it on the scope so we don't have to blast our bloody ears off. I put the volume way down. We can actually remove the speaker if you've got the volume way down. You should not run a tube system without a speaker when you've got volume on there. Not a good idea. And now we're going to measure, we're going to put the scope across here, and be careful not to get this wrong. This is negative, this is the ground, and that's the positive. Now, all things being the same, I've got the volume on max, and there's our output. We've got 300 millivolts RMS. I think they say set it on the 2-volt range, so that should do it. Normally you'd use an AC voltmeter, but let me see what happens if I start tweaking these transformers. And I'm actually going to start with L8 and L9, which is right inside the FM front end. So let's put this in there carefully. We've got 280 millivolts. Have I got that yet? Maybe not. Let's try that one. See, that's actually gone up quite a bit. There's our peak. Let's try the other one. That's actually gone up quite a bit too. I've got 500 on there now. I don't understand why I'm getting such a difference. The other one again. Okay. So that's just about peaked. Try a bit more. That's going down again. Remember, this thing is so-called lightly coupled, so any movement of the chassis means that the connection between the coupling to that ECC85 could change slightly, so that could change slightly. So the idea is to get something relative. I think I've peaked it. Now let me go to the underside and do the first one. Whoa. Bloody hell. That is a hell of a change. Now, I don't understand why it should be that much. But let me try the top one. Now the top side. That's going down. There's a peak. Okay. Let me try the last one now. Top side first. Trying to get my hand around the back without getting a shock, touching the wrong place. Right, let's try this. Whoa. Oh, bloody hell, I've moved the coupling again. So there's a peak. That waving around was the coupling that gets moved. Now let me try the last one on the underside. And I don't understand why I'm not getting a deformation of the sine wave. There's our maximum. There's our peak. Well, according to them, this thing is aligned. Now, is it? That's the question. Well, let me tune it and see what we get. So what I've really done is I've done this almost as if it was an AM alignment, where I'm looking for the AF audio peak amplitude. And as you can see, I'm getting a very, very good, I'm just changing the volume knob now. I'm getting a very, very nice sine wave, which is the modulated signal. Just want to see what happens if I take that frequency, the 10.7 megahertz, and increase it slightly. Okay, what I'm doing here is I've gone to the 10.7 megahertz carrier, okay, and I'm upping it by 10 kilohertz at a time. So 10.71, 10.72, 10.73, 7.74. Let's just go the other way. 690, 680, 670, and it starts twisting there. So what we're seeing here is that this is actually perfectly tuned, aligned at 10.7 megahertz. If it wasn't, then we would get a peak. This thing would go higher at a different frequency than 10.7. So according to this, I've got this thing perfectly aligned. And as I said, it's not the usual way I do it. I normally go by the really the AGC voltage, that negative DC voltage that's created across that electrolytic capacitor. I'll be quite honest with you, I can't tell you off the top of my head exactly what type of FM detector we've got here. It's not the one. There are quite a few, and I'm not quite sure exactly which one this is. But the point is, this seems to be working. So what I'm going to do now is tune it to FM and see if it improves, if I can remember what it was like, and see if it's improved. Let's try that. We're back to the speaker connection, and I've got an antenna in. Let's see how this thing receives. Well, that's definitely a stronger signal than I used to get. When I look at the deflection on the Magic Eye, this thing is deflecting a hell of a lot more than it was before.
sábado e domingo. Não perca os descontos extra sobre os preços outlet para deixar os pequenos super confiantes no início das aulas. Extravagant.
Well, that definitely receives better. So this thing is aligned. I get about, with this antenna, I get about 3 or 4 FM stations here that are fairly strong. The ones I tune to, I can see that the deviation is higher. The reception seems to be better than it was. So I think this method of alignment, and I've got to read a bit more on it because quite honestly it surprised me, but I think we've got it. I think it works on this particular type of discriminator. It actually makes sense because what you're trying to do is you really are trying to get the best audio signal out when you tune to a station. So if you align the IF to get the best audio signal out, I suppose what you're doing is really aligning the IF. The discriminator part, that what is it? You can get a ratio detector. You can get the, what is it, Foster-Seeley. I've got to read a bit more on this. I just do them automatically now, and every now and then I've got to do a bit more studying because I've forgotten some of the stuff that I've read quite a few times actually. But I've got to really read up and see why this thing works and if it can be used on all types of FM setups. I'm not sure it will work on all of them. Well, that's it. That's the FM alignment. Now what I need to do is complete the installation into the cabinet and connect the Bluetooth module that I built up with that PCB setup that I ordered, and connect that in there. I'll show you how I connect it, and then we need to put it into the cabinet and finish this up. It's looking good. I've connected a cable type BNC female socket on here, and that's the one that's wired inside to the pickup input. So it's easier then to just plug in the Bluetooth audio in here. And over here I've connected a 2.5mm female power jack to the connection points to this lamp. That'll give me 6.3 volts AC. The reason I put it on here like this is, again, to make it easy to remove. The other thing to be careful about is make sure that the ground here is actually connected to the ground of the light bulb. And the reason is, if this thing flaps around and it happens to short to ground, because this is connected to that point there, you won't get a short of that line. So again, to remove this whole thing, you just desolder those 2 points there, and we're back to the original. Now let's look at the Bluetooth module. And here we have the 2 Bluetooth module connections. We've got the power, 6.3 volt AC. It's on the male plug. So this will connect to the female plug socket over there. I mentioned that the female socket, the ground, the external ring, should be connected to the ground point of the 6.3 volt AC. And all that means is that it's connected to part of the AC that's actually shorted to chassis. Because AC doesn't really have polarity, but it does make it safer in case that thing touches something else. Then the audio, again, we've got the ground and the audio signal. So that goes into the female RCA at the back. So we'll plug this in and test it all out. So I'm going to power the radio now. I'll just push the TA, which is the pickup input, and we should... Brilliant. We've got our Bluetooth reception. We'll test that all together once we get this thing to the cabinet. That's fabulous. Don't expect anything out of there because I don't have anything connected to... I'm not sending any signal to the Bluetooth yet. So let's get this all in the cabinet and have a look at the final result and do some testing. Right, so the first stage is getting the radio out of the contraption. I use the existing holes in the bottom that normally are where you screw it onto the cabinet. These are very, very handy because you can screw them onto that rectangular aluminium stand without having to damage any of the radio. Makes it very flexible and easy to flip around and so on. So we get that out first. And here's the cabinet. Now you've got to be very careful when you fit it in, because don't forget you've got a very brittle glass faceplate in the front there, and it's very, very easy just to ding it as you're going in there, and that'll really, really ruin your day. Make sure the antenna leads are moved over the top. Everything's fitting properly. You hold it on the front as well and help lead it into the natural position, as we've done here. And now it's time to put the screws on the bottom. And to do that, you've obviously got to put it over the edge of the desk or something and screw it in. At least get the two front ones in. You might have to try and use a thin screwdriver to make sure that the holes are lined. And once those two in the front are in, you can now put the radio on its back, because the chassis is now held onto the cabinet, and finish screwing in the last two screws. Most of these radios have 4. Sometimes you have a few more, but this one had 4. So in they go. One thing to mention is you've got to make sure that the cover at the bottom, which has that aluminum sheet to prevent noise, is connected to the chassis as well. You do that through the screws at the bottom. Time for the speaker. I've got the speaker wires. They're the original speaker wires that were in that connector. Clean up the contacts. Make sure that the holes on the speaker have been cleaned, which they have. Just making them a bit shorter here so we don't have any excess. Now when you connect that, what I try to do is I'll make sure that I actually fit them in and bend them over, so that the wire is actually mechanically held to the speaker, and then I'm going to solder it. And the reason for this is that if for some reason the solder joint doesn't come out too well, you're not going to have that speaker wire flapping in the breeze, because the breeze inside this chassis has got a lot of high voltages. The last thing you want is to pump high voltage into the secondary of the transformer. That'll also ruin your day. Just make sure that the antenna fits in nicely, and then I've got the connectors for the Bluetooth. Put the Bluetooth in place, top corner, with a bit of double-sided tape. That is usually enough. You've got to make sure that there's enough thickness of tape so that it doesn't just pop off because of the wires, the component wires coming out the bottom. Put that in there, and then connect the power connector, and then of course also the audio output connector to the appropriate female socket that I have at the back. This will then obviously come through the back plate when I put that in. And we are done. Everything's in place. Speaker's been wired, soldered in. The Bluetooth receiver is connected to the front end, the corner, and everything is nicely tucked away, all the wires tucked away, so we don't have anything loose inside the chassis. And we are there. And here's the final result. This thing is looking really, really good. The natural color of the wood came through beautifully. I'm actually very, very happy that I didn't color it. I just used transparent lacquer, quite a few layers of it of course, and then sanded it down with that very, very, very fine steel wool. 0000, 4 zeros, and it comes out sort of a matte finish, which you can then just polish with furniture polish. I mean, look at this guy. Everything just perfect. And that's not my doing, it's the fact that it was in great condition. If you look at the knobs, they just cleaned out beautifully. This is the difference between having a radio that's, you know, it doesn't really matter how dirty it is, but as long as the parts are all intact and they're not chipped, and, you know, people have given it a little bit of love and care, you can get this result. And while we talk about results, I want to show you this grill cloth. If you recall, it wasn't really that dirty to start off with. I've had some of my viewers talk about how to get this clean, and I've told them how I do it. And as luck would have it, one of the guys actually tried my suggestion and the grill cloth came unstuck from the panel. It's just typical. You advise someone and it happens to them. Never happened to me before, fortunately. What I did with this guy is I literally just upend it in the bathtub or in the shower, use the shower spray, wet it down, rub quite a lot of shaving foam on it, leave it on its side so that it doesn't really soak in that much water, leave it for a while, and then I just spray it down again and sort of try and rinse off as much of the water as I can, and then put it out to dry. I've been very lucky. I know sometimes the edges do sort of start peeling off, but they just go back with a bit of glue. But none of them so far has actually peeled away completely. So I'm really, really sorry that it happened to you. Well, this is the result, and it's time for us to give it a bit of a test, because obviously that's what it's all about. Now what we're going to try first is the Bluetooth. So first thing to do is connect TA, which is the pickup input. Now I've actually heard it make a sound, which is the Bluetooth telling the audio that it's got something. And on our iPad, there it is, connected. Now what I've got on the iPad is I've actually got some audio ready. This is royalty free again. There we go. Brilliant. It works beautifully. The sound is great. The controls work. They respond well. I don't notice that much difference with the bass, but bear in mind I had the bass quite high here. And the treble I like putting in, well, really near the end. It depends on what sort of music you're listening to, but I generally put it almost at maximum. I like the sound better that way. The hi-fi makes a very, very nice difference. I don't know whether you can hear it on the speaker over YouTube, but it makes quite a nice difference. It gives it a more open soundstage. The SB works very well if you're receiving radio, just voice. Sprache, I think it's called, speech. Bloody hell, I really am cannibalizing the German language. I'm really sorry, guys. But that works very well when you're listening to, say, medium wave or short wave, which we'll see in a little while. So that is the Bluetooth. And I can see this thing working on practically two buttons. That one and FM. Because in Madeira we have, and you'll see in a while, we've got about 4 stations that I pick up quite well here. I live in Caniço, Santa Cruz, which is about halfway between Funchal on the south coast and the airport, which is on the south coast but to the east. So most of the transmitters are in the Funchal area itself. So I'm sort of on the fringe here, but I still get 4 decent powered stations here. And when I do want to listen to one of those, FM on this thing is brilliant, as it is with a lot of the other tube radios. And obviously Bluetooth with, with your iPhone or your mobile device, using Spotify, whatever you're using, it's just a great way to give this radio a lot of use. And I know there are some people who have, I know they've actually attacked me about it. Adding Bluetooth to this device is sacrilege. It's apparently disrespectful. It is a crime against humanity. Well, I respect those opinions, but I like to give them more use because I believe that putting these things on a shelf, museum style, is disrespectful and is a crime against humanity. So to each their own. Let's try the FM. So here we go. We are on the low end of the band, 87.5, whatever this lowest end is. And we go up. There's our first one. A couple of weak receptions in the middle here, which I'm sure I could probably improve with a better antenna, but I don't listen to those anyway. Look at that thing. Almost closed. Really good reception on there. Again, a few weaker ones down here. Almost full strength again. This thing is really, really good sound. This is a good speaker in there. And then the cabinet obviously creates a good resonator.
Do país está de volta a 20 de outubro. Em Cascais, zona Ponte Vasco da Gama, milhares de atletas rumam à meta na Praça do Comércio. Junte-se aos grandes nomes do atletismo nacional e internacional na maratona e meia maratona de Lisboa. Faça a sua inscrição em maratonaclubedeportugal.com. Quem tiver os duelos individuais são ganhos para uma espécie de eremitério.
And this is the one I listen to most. This thing is at almost closed. Brilliant, brilliant reception. And that's it, our FM is there, that's it. We got this thing going up to 100 megahertz. There are a few more stations over here above 100 megahertz, but obviously I can't even dream of those. I don't want to adjust the alignment, the front end alignment on this, which I could do, and I've done it in 1 or 2 where I've actually gone up from 100 to 101.6, which is where we have another strong station over here. This one is actually a gift for a family member of mine, and he lives in Funchal, where most of the stations, if not all of them, can be received within this up to the 100 megahertz limit. So it'll be fine for him there. And that's it, that's FM. Let's try, I think I better wait for a little bit later to try the long wave, medium wave. We can try short wave now. Let's try that. I've got the mini whip antenna connected here. It's about 5 in the afternoon. I'm not sure how good this is going to be, but we'll try it anyway.
swinging her back.
We're at 25 meters, 25 meter band, about 12
She wasn't
megahertz.
as harsh with me as she would have been with the other bodyguards, but she told Mao of what I had done. Now, special privileges. Mao was angry.
Zona adecuada para localización, zona urbanizada.
Y un poco cómo se estaba planteando esto que han hecho esta semana, ¿no?
Definitely not a good time for shortwave right now. Quick look at medium wave, we're going to have the same problem.
El broche final lo pondrá esta película de Rocky Horror Show de Jim Sharman. Además, en los próximos días se proyectarán otras películas
Canary
como
Islands,
Moulin
both of
Rouge,
those.
El Rey León, El Cre...
Sí, igual, ¿sabes, no? Y eso.
Oye, ¿cómo son las playas de Siquirín y del norte? Porque creo que más al...
Expulsan a los extraterrestres. Propongo que quedemos todos en... y vayamos al área 51 que esté... calentando por el tacón.
Hey, and the one Portuguese station. Brilliant. Getting good reception doesn't mean you get good music, but anyway. So that's medium wave at, 6 in the afternoon. Not a good time. Let's try long wave. I don't expect anything here at this time of day. Except a hell of a lot of noise. Oh. This is on about 178, 180 kilohertz. I don't even know what language that is. Alright, we'll try that a bit later. In the evening, these three get really lively, especially long wave and medium wave, especially due to the mini whip antenna, which is very, very good for the lower frequencies, and we'll leave it till later. Okay, it's about 10 p.m. Let's see what we get on medium wave.
A las 9 de esta noche se levantaba la capilla ardiente y los restos mortales de Blanca Fernanda eran trasladados a Pozuelo de Alarcón para ser incinerados. La Olímpica ha comunicado su intención de esparcir sus cenizas por la zona de montaña Sevilla, conocida como los Siete Picos, uno de los lugares favoritos de Blanca.
La última despedida de los compañeros. En esta jornada deportiva les contamos además que ya ha finalizado el último partido en segunda división. Derby Canario y la fotografía.
Con la raqueta de tenis, pero
Además, ha comenzado la Liga Femenina, el resultado más...
No lo gane, que es solo un partido de tenis.
This is from North Africa somewhere.
se calcula que la selección española continúa en su camino hacia ser frente a el rebote. Casi 4-1-40 nada para la canadiense. El domingo Rafa Nadal disputará la final del US Open.
ينسق اللقاءات وينفذ
Here's another one from North Africa.
مباشرة زميلنا أيمن العبد.
قصير وهذا الموضوع المسائل المطروحة على أنه هذه الظواهر ما يصلح.
And another. So there we are. The usual Spanish stations coming from the Canary Islands and a few extra ones from North Africa, probably Morocco and places like that. That was medium wave. Let's try long wave. That's in French, don't know where that's coming from. Another French one. So a little bit more than in the afternoon. I sometimes get, I believe it's BBC4 that transmits from the south of England. I occasionally pick it up here on long wave. But there's never much on long wave anyway, but there's always a bit in the evening like this. Now short wave.
Make sure this would not emerge because we didn't discuss right now. So
That's 49 meters.
It is the time that being respected. Voli ljuto. Kako se na kineskom kaže, volite li jeste ljutu hranu?
Il était 3 à 4 heures du matin lorsque...
Chers amis, merci encore à vous, un grand bravo pour ces...
This is on about 42 meter band, so that's probably an amateur radio. We can actually decode that if we inject a signal, 7 point something megahertz, and you can create the carrier and actually get it coming out the other end. Let's actually try that.
Secure all Asia counters. Take all Florida 5 Yankee.
Take contest, secure all Asia counters. Take all Foxtrot 5 Yankee. Take contest,
Secure all Asia counters. Take all Florida.
all execute contest, secure all Asia counters. Take all Florida 5 Yankee. Take all Foxtrot 5 Yankee counters. Take contest, secure all Asia counters. Take all Florida 5
Yankee. Secure contest, all Asia counters. Take all Foxtrot 5 Yankee.
Okay, so what I've done is I've injected a signal. I've connected the signal generator producing a 7.120900 megahertz, and I've injected that, just plugged it or connected it to the outside of the antenna. So what I'm basically doing is creating a carrier at the frequency that these guys are communicating, and therefore I can get their sideband.
Estoy cerca de Alicante, puede ser.
Their sideband.
Echo Foxtrot 5 Yankee. Take contest, secure all Asia counters. Take all Florida 5 Yankee. Take contest, secure all Asia counters. Take all Foxtrot 5 Yankee. Secure contest, all Asia counters. Take all Florida 5 Yankee. Secure contest, all Asia counters. Take all Foxtrot 5 Yankee. Secure contest, all Asia counters. Take all Florida 5 Yankee. Secure contest, all Asia counters. Take all Foxtrot 5 Yankee. Secure contest, all Asia counters. Take all Florida 5 Yankee. Secure contest, all Asia counters. Take all Foxtrot 5 Yankee. Secure contest, all Asia counters. Take all Florida 5 Yankee. Secure contest, all Asia counters. Take all Foxtrot 5 Yankee. Secure contest, all Asia counters.
So this is amateur radio. You'd need a basically you need a beat generator, a generation of a carrier.
Echo Florida 5 Yankees. Secure contest, secure all laser contest. Echo Florida 5 Yankee.
And you can decipher it, but if I turn that off, this thing goes back to Donald Duck voice. Listen to that, I'll switch. There we go. That's what you normally hear. But anyway, it's just a little mess around. Carry on.
And for the retirement accounts, and it just sounds like...
Ecología y ambiente antes del Día Nacional de Bajas
This is all on 41 meters. Coming to 31 meters.
vegetarianas, el uso de sistemas de aire acondicionado y la cantidad...
25 meters.
我跟他打招呼，见他扶着拐杖。
And if you go higher in frequency, doubt very much we'll get anything. There we are. So, what have we found? In the evenings, long wave gets quite a bit more. There's a lot of noise today, which is not normal. But anyway, it's the atmosphere. What can you do about it? Long wave, you get quite a bit more in the evening. Medium wave, you start getting North Africa from here. I believe it's North Africa. I think the French ones are also from North Africa. And of course, a hell of a lot of stuff from the Canary Islands in Spanish. Shortwave, obviously, you get quite a bit more down in the, well, actually in the lower frequencies during the evening and higher frequencies during the day. That's pretty normal. And what we did there with the 42 meter bands or 40 meter band amateur radio is we found one of the communications. We found someone communicating. Didn't know what it was. You hear it as a garbled sort of Donald Duck voice because it's a sideband communication, and obviously this thing doesn't have the ability to decode the sideband audio. So what you do is you inject a carrier, and the way to do that is you leave it on the garbled, get your signal generator lightly connected, or just not actually connected, but just connected to the outside of the antenna. And you feed a signal. The one I was feeding was about 100 millivolts RMS. You feed a signal around 7.2 megahertz, which is that particular amateur band, 40 meter band. And I actually put a carrier on the signal. I modulated my signal, and I start tuning that signal generator frequency till I hear the tone, and then I know that I'm more or less there. And then you just fine tune it till you get the audio coming through. No great mystery, but it's just a bit of fun you can do with these radios. And that's it. That's our demo. And you know what? This is like, bloody hell, this thing's come to an end finally. One of the longest series that I've done. And the reason I did this is because a lot of people have asked me questions that I try to answer in one series. I hope I've answered a few. So this is a wrap. And I'm extremely happy with the result. I'm almost sorry I promised him this radio. I wouldn't have minded keeping it, but hey, promises made, eh? Well, that is it. And I certainly hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you've learned something. I certainly have. As usual, I've probably learned more than I've taught. Not that teaching is the prime objective here, but if you've enjoyed this, please click the subscribe button, put the little bell on there so you get notified of the next videos, press like, share, all that jazz. And if you want to support the channel, you can do so on Patreon. The link is at the end of the video. I look forward to seeing you again soon, and thanks for watching. Bye for now.